Is the DJI Air 2S still worth it in 2022? Well, the short answer is yes. Simply because it's not even a year old. This was only released in April 2021, and you get really good value for money at $999 for the base package. You get 5.4K future-proof video resolution, more than decent flight time, and overall a fantastic drone that is super fun to fly, that you can even use to make some money with if you choose to do so. Now that's the short answer. The long answer goes more into details that you should be considering when buying a new drone, just like price, the actual drone and build quality and sensors and what have you, flight time, aka battery, the connection and controller, as well as the app and the features that come with the app, and of course image quality for video and photo, and last but not least some alternatives that you might want to look at in case you decide this drone is not for you. Now there's much more to a flying camera than just these things, but these are the high-level things that I think a beginner should look into before purchasing a drone. Now starting off with the price, and there's basically three prices to consider when looking into the DJI Air 2S. Now the first price is $999, and that basically gets you everything you see here. A drone, a battery, some propellers, and the wicked awesome controller, which we'll talk more about in a second. The next price is $1299 for the Fly More combo. That comes with everything I just mentioned, plus 2 extra batteries, ND filters, a battery charging hub, some little goodies, extra propellers, a little carry bag that's splash proof, and a bunch of other things that come in handy. I'd recommend the Fly More combo if you know that drone flying is something that you would like to do, because you will end up buying more batteries in the long run anyway. So if you buy 2 extra batteries, that's already $300. So in this case, you get the 2 extra batteries, but you get ND filters, which would run you $100, and more and more and more. I made a whole video about what's in the box and how the math works out. So if you're interested, check the description down below. Now, the last price you need to know about is a $1749, and that is basically everything I just talked about, the Fly More combo, plus the smart controller. Now, while the smart controller is really cool, it's basically a controller that is bigger than this and like has an integrated high quality HD display. So you don't have to connect your phone or iPad. It's really cool, but that's a whole lot of extra money. While I do think it is really cool, I don't think it's necessary, especially if you're just starting out. I've been flying drones for over 5 years. I don't have the smart controller. I don't really think I need it. Plus all of us have at least a phone and or an iPad lying around that we can use to fly with. So if you're just starting out, I wouldn't look into that package. So on to the actual drone. It looks and feels pretty much just like the Mavic Air 2. Note that they actually dropped the Mavic in the name on this one. So this is not the DJI Mavic Air 2S. This is the DJI Air 2S. I know, weird, right? But it feels just like its predecessor, the Mavic Air 2, except this one is 20 grams heavier, so that you don't really feel. But the one thing that you will feel is the increased camera sensor. So this one has a 1-inch CMOS sensor, which takes 20 megapixel photos. And yes, some people might say, wait, the Mavic Air 2 shoots 48 megapixel photos. Yes, technically the Mavic Air 2 does shoot 48 megapixel photos, but it is still more of a marketing stunt than anything, because it only has a 12 megapixel sensor, and what they do in the camera, they divide each pixel into 4 smaller pixels. So yeah, technically you get 48 megapixels, but the actual image sensor on the camera is still 12 megapixels. So one could argue that the 20 megapixels on this one will look much better than the 48 megapixel on the predecessor, the Mavic Air 2. But the big difference is in video. Now both shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, but the Air 2S shoots 5.4K at 30 frames per second, which I think is super cool because it gives you the ability to like zoom in post and still have a super sharp 4K video output. in your final project. Now, just like the predecessor, it shoots 120 frames per second on full HD. The Mavic Air 2 also had a 240 frames per second mode, and I have to say I tried it a couple of times and I felt like the whole image was kind of like too soft and blurry and a little dark. So I feel like while it is really cool to be able to use 240 frames per second, I don't think it's really usable in the long run anyway. So 120 frames per second is more than you'll ever need. Both drones come with the H.264 and the H.265 codec. Basically, the H.265 codec can store or retain more information in a smaller file size, getting you more runway with either the integrated 8 GB of memory, which is not going to get you very far either way, especially if you're shooting 4K or 5.4K for that matter. But the H.265 codec still gets you a little bit further, and it's the newest codec that is currently being used. Also, the bitrate went up from 120 megabits to 150 megabits per second, and the DJI Air 2S has now a D-Log profile that can shoot in 10-bit, which means you can store way more colors in 10-bit than you were previously able to do in 8-bit on the Mavic Air 2. Now, that being said, while that is wicked awesome and more geared towards professionals, because professional drones have, or professional cameras in general, have a 10-bit mode, you do need a really beefy computer to be able to work with 10-bit files. So the good thing is you don't have to choose it. You can still record in 8-bit. And of course it has an HDR mode just like the predecessor had. Other than that, it is pretty much the same as I mentioned before. The only difference is that it now has two additional obstacle sensors on the top, which I really wish they had put on the side, because you're not very likely to crash into something above you, but it's much more likely to crash into something while flying sideways. You get the idea. And also the propellers that come out of the box are already low noise propellers. Previously you had to buy them for an extra 30 bucks, and now like they come out of the box, which is really nice, and you know, they come from DJI, so you know that these will work perfectly with your drone. So that's really nice. On to the battery, aka flight time. Now the flight time actually was reduced from the 34 minutes on the Mavic Air 2 to 31 minutes. In both of my extensive tests, I would say on the Mavic Air 2 I get around 31 minutes versus on this one 26 to 27. So the difference is still the same. I would say after flying both drones significantly for many months in a row, you don't really feel the difference that you've lost a couple of minutes here and there. I think, you know, the upper 20-minute range is still fantastic. You get up in the air and you don't immediately start freaking out that you're running out of battery before you got all the shots that you wanted. So I think it's still very decent flight time. One thing to note about batteries in general, if you know you like this hobby, if you even want to take it a little bit further and make money with your drone, videos on that down below in the description. You will need more batteries. You will definitely go and buy more batteries. I own 4, and as I said, I own the little charging hub that comes with the Fly More combo. So just want to put that out there, that if you make your purchasing decision and you know you'll buy more batteries, might as well buy the batteries ahead and get the Fly More combo. Onto the controller and connectivity. So first of all, the Mavic Air 2 used OcuSync 2.0. The DJI Air 2S uses OcuSync 3.0, which means that the data transmission, or the max transmission distance, went up from 10 kilometers to 12 kilometers. So basically 6-point-something miles to like almost 8 miles. And then also the transmission bit rate went up from like 12 megabits per second to 16 megabits per second. I would say for beginners, or for every responsible drone pilot out there, it doesn't matter actually, because A, we're not supposed to fly 6 miles away, because we're always supposed to fly within line of sight, and 6 miles is not that. That is way too far. And also the 12 versus 16 megabits on a little phone or even an iPad, I don't know how much you really feel that. So I don't think that per se matters. What I can say is that the connectivity with the Air 2S, just as well with the Mavic Air 2, is just fantastic. We have, as a reference here, I have the Mavic Air, which I do recommend as a drone because it's cute, it's fantastic, it has really good image quality. But the difference is basically the controller and the connectivity. It is significantly different. So like if you fly the Mavic Air 1, the original one, with this controller here for like 3,000 feet and you're not using a range extender, you start getting a choppy image until it completely disconnects when you pee a little bit in your pants, and then the drone starts automatically flying back and reconnects. But with this one, you really don't have this problem. If you're 3,000 feet away, 4 or 5, and that's, in my experience, the absolute maximum on line of sight anyways, you get a buttery smooth 1080p feedback to your phone or your iPad. Huge, tremendous difference, the OcuSync technology. So if you own one of the older drones or a drone that doesn't have this technology, that's worth looking into, because it really gives you peace of mind. Like, the drone does not disconnect. It gives you constant, steady feedback on what the drone sees, and it just makes the whole flying experience a little bit less nerve-wracking, is the word. Yeah. One thing to note is that while I absolutely love this controller because it just feels great in hand, just popping in your phone is easy. You just pull this out, the cable lives in here, and it just comes out. You plug in your phone, and this is the actual antenna. So no more fiddling with like facing it perpendicular or all that stuff. It's really great, and it feels great, and it feels like basically an Apple product of drones. Like, it's fantastic. This one is much more compact, right? With the Mavic Air 1, which, as I said, I would recommend, especially if you can get your hands on a good second-hand deal. You can put your drone in your pocket, and you can put your controller in the other pocket, and then you can go about your hike or whatever it is that you do, and you have a flying 4K at 30 frames per second with you at any given point in time, which is awesome. You can't do that with the newer models here, the Mavic Air 2 or the DJI Air 2S. While they are still considered compact drones, this controller doesn't fit in your pocket, and even if you fold this drone up, it also doesn't fit in anyone's pocket, not even if you wear baggy pants, in my opinion. So this one will require a bag. I mean, I don't know how realistic it is to constantly put your drone in your pocket, but it's a nice thing to know that you can just like grab it and not have to bring a bag whatsoever. With this one, you will need a bag. But good thing is that the Fly More combo comes with one. Now let's talk a little bit about the app and all the features it brings to the drone. Now, these wonderful drones, all of them, are absolutely useless if you don't have the proper app to fly them with. Now, the older drones like the Phantom and the Mavic Air, they come with the DJI 4 Go app. The newer ones like the Mavic Mini 2, even the original Mini, the Mavic Air 2 and the DJI Air 2S, they come with the DJI Fly app. Now, the DJI Fly app was originally designed to be a little bit more beginner friendly, while the DJI 4 Go app was more geared towards professionals. I would argue that the DJI Fly app has significantly changed ever since it first came out, and is now moving closer and closer and closer to the DJI 4 Go app. The fact of the matter is that there's so many features and so many functions that you as a drone pilot will need to access. They'll just need to put it somewhere, right? And that somewhere is somewhere on the screen. So when you first open up the DJI Fly app, it can be a little bit intimidating, or at least confusing. But of course, either way, you will need the app to access all the amazing features like panorama modes, smart photo mode, point of interest 3.0, active track 4.0, spotlight 2.0, hyperlapses, a bunch of intelligent photo modes like circle, zipline, rocket, boomerang, where you basically just draw a rectangle around a subject, whether that's yourself or somebody else, and you hit start, and it automatically flies a very difficult to fly maneuver around your subject while recording it, making it super easy to record really cool cinematic scenes. Speaking of cool cinematic scenes, the DJI Air 2S, or at least the latest version of the DJI Fly app, now also has this cool new thing called Master Shots. Basically similar to the quick shots that I just mentioned, you just draw a little rectangle around your subject to tell the drone like what you want to film, and then the master shot will fly left, right, up and down and all the way around you, creating like a bunch of different shots, and then while still in the air automatically compiles it into a cool cinematic compilation video that's like 30 to 60 seconds long that you can just instantly share with your friends. So you don't even have to offload the footage onto your computer and like try to learn video editing. It will do that while the drone is still flying. So by the time it lands, you have something wicked awesome to share on social media. I think for drone beginners who are very keen on like capturing maybe their travel experiences and are a little bit intimidated by like having to learn iMovie or Final Cut or like all these other video editing softwares, I think this is a great way. You just do a master shot, the drone flies by itself, the drone edits by itself, and by the time it lands, bada boom, you have something really cool to show your friends and family on the internet. So I think that is very, very handy for beginners. Nice going, DJI. Now, we can't have a video about the DJI Air 2S and not talk about the image quality for photo and video. Now, we've been comparing this drone today a lot to its predecessor, the Mavic Air 2. So this one will have to go out of the way because that is a different ball game and you can get it much, much cheaper now. It is very, very similar to the Mavic Air 2. Is it significantly better in terms of image quality to be worth the upgrade? Well, I would say maybe not. If you already have the Mavic Air 2 and you're happy with the Mavic Air 2 and you're happy with the footage you're getting, I think it might not be worth actually going through the trouble of selling it and then buying the DJI Air 2S. Now, if you love image quality and you're super keen about the 5.4K, I have to say that you can definitely tell a difference, and especially on footage where there's a lot of shadows. If you like fly over a forest and you have a lot of shadows like in the trees, I would argue that the footage of the DJI Air 2S has less noise in it. Now, if that's worth the upgrade, that's entirely up to you. But if you don't own a drone yet and you're thinking about buying one, I would probably recommend the DJI Air 2S, because if you look at the price comparison, at least for both new, then I don't think it's that much, because the Mavic Air 2 for some reason still hasn't dropped in price, so it's still $799. So for $999, you do get a better camera and really a much, much better sensor, right? So I think that's worth it. Now, that being said, since the Mavic Air 2 came out in about April 2020, so it's now almost 2 years old, I think you're much more likely to come across a good secondhand deal. So if you can come across a good secondhand deal for the Mavic Air 2, it really depends on you. Like if you'd rather want to save some money, or if you want to go for like the best image quality you can get for this price range, right? Again, we're not talking about the Mavic 3 today. Also, as I mentioned before, the 5.4K, I think really future-proofs your footage and it gives you a lot of ability in post. So I love the 5.4K. Definitely a deal breaker for me. All right, and finally some alternatives if you decide this drone is not for you. Now, I hope the comparisons to the Mavic Air 2 made sense. I just think like if you are on your drone buying journey and you're looking into which drone should I buy, then the Mavic Air 2 is probably next on your list to look into. Now, if you decide you much rather spend a lot less money on your drone and you don't want to be in the $800 to $1,000 range, or again, if you want the Fly More combo, you're going above $1,000, and you'd rather want to spend, well, as little as possible while still getting a high quality drone, my recommendation number one would be, depending on where you are, to try to get your hands on a great deal for the original Mavic Air. Why am I saying that? Because A, it uses the DJI 4Go app, which I think is a really cool app, and B, it still shoots 4K at 30 frames per second, And it has the wicked awesome form factor I talked about earlier. Both go into your pocket. Yeah, the controller is a little bit more fiddly, right? I mean, this pops out here, and then your little stickies are in here that you have to screw in, and then your phone goes at the bottom, and then you have to fiddle with the antennas. It's not the worst in the world, but I do prefer the controller on this one. So depending on where you are, you might still get your hands on the Mavic Air 1 or the original Mavic Air. But since they discontinued it, I think starting last year, it might be more and more difficult to get one. Now, if you can't find one, or you don't want to go for it because you prefer newer technologies, or you prefer to buy new things, then I would say the DJI Mini 2 is the next best way to go. It basically is the same thing in green, as we would like to say in Germany. It looks and feels just like the Air 2S or the Mavic Air 2, but half the size. So it weighs about half the size. It is much smaller. I think it's even a little bit smaller than the Mavic Air, but comes with the same controller as the Air 2S. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. As I said, I love this controller. It feels great in my hands. It feels sturdily built. It feels like an Apple product for drones. You know, it's just like, it's top notch, but you know, has the form factor. It doesn't really fit in your pocket. So really depends on what you prefer there. The DJI Mini 2 shoots 4K at 30 frames per second, but has no obstacle avoidance whatsoever. So none on the top, none on the sides, of course, and not even at the bottom. So you have to be a little bit more careful with flying. And that's all I have on the DJI Air 2S. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. Do you think it's still a good recommendation for 2022? Are you gonna buy one? Or what other drones would you consider that I haven't mentioned in this video? Just let me know in the comments. I would love to start a conversation. I will see you next time. Until then, happy flying.